Hi, I'm Linwood Barclay. I'm here for one final twist, and I'm going to be talking to you folks about Not a Word, my new book coming out any day now. So let's do it.
Today on One Final Twist, we are joined by the legendary Linwood Barclay, whose newest book, Not a Word, is available August the 25th from William Morrow. Welcome to One Final Twist.
Before we get started into asking some more in-depth questions, why don't you tell anybody who's not read the book yet what it's about in general?
Well, it's about a fellow named Reese, and of course, hardly I would bet almost no one's read it yet. It's about a fellow named Reese. He's dropped by his parents' place to, just he wants to talk to his dad, and there's no answer at the door. And when he goes in, he starts looking around the house, and he finds just the horrific in his parents' bedroom, what appears to be a murder suicide and a gun on the floor not far from his father's hand. And he's just, of course, devastated and doesn't know what could have happened. And not long after the police arrive, he's called them. He gets a phone call that is he's going to hear from the last person in the world he might have expected to hear from. And all of this mess is going to plunge Reese into all sorts of secrets about his parents' past, about the work that his father did for a big pharmaceutical company. And as he sort of starts digging deeper into what is really a family tragedy, he may find that the ones that are still around, nearest and dearest to him, may also be in jeopardy.
This is novel number 25, if my research was correct. Is that right?
I was trying to figure that out. It might be the 26th,
Okay.
but it's once you get past 20, who's counting? It's just, I can't remember how time either. And there's some books, it's, I think, 26th novel, but I've done some other books. I did a memoir, I've done a couple of humor books and stuff like that. But, I just really count the novels.
I got you. Do you still get anxious when you're getting ready to start, when you get that idea in your head, do you still get anxious or have any kind of process that you go through to start the book?
I think when I'm most anxious, is not when I start, it's when the book is finished and then I send it to my editors, one in New York and one in London, and I wait for the verdict. And it's like waiting to get tests back from the doctor's office. Is it benign? Is it malignant? How's it going to go?
Mm.
And I found that not only as an author, sometimes do you not see what's not working, you don't see what really is working. So you may have done something that really works and they love it, and that sometimes will catch you by surprise, like, oh, okay, that was all right. So that part kind of fills me with anxiety. And there's a little bit of anxiety attached with just as the book was released, because no matter how well I may have done in the past, I always expect every book to tank the moment it hits the shelves. But the actual starting of a book is not so much anxious making as it is, it's kind of fun. It's like, okay, we're going to start pushing the boulder up the hill. And then I find when I hit around 60,000 words of a book that's maybe 90 or 100, once you hit 60, you get over the hump, and you can see the end coming. And that part is kind of fun.
Yeah. Let me do a follow up, Teresa, real quick. You talked about sending it to your American publisher or your American editor and your European editor or your UK editor. How different are the versions that get put out, say in the UK versus America?
They're identical.
Okay, they are. Okay.
They're identical. The covers are different,
Yeah.
because each region has kind of their own sensibilities and what they think works, and so the covers are different. I don't even think I think the UK picks up the version that's edited out of New York, so I don't even think that they add the U's into favor and flavor
Gotcha.
in the editions that they've got, or they don't put the single quotes in. So, but the storylines are identical.
Okay. The UK covers, I will say that they're a little bit better than the American versions. I wonder
It,
why they differ so much.
well, and it's really a question is like, I think that the cover of Not a Word, and I wish I had both in front of me here, the cover of Not a Word, the US, the North American edition, I think is this time is the better one.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think the UK's ones are better. Like for my last book, Whistle, I thought that the UK covers worked better than the North American. But it's just everybody has a kind of different take, on how what they think will work with their readership. And so, you know, I think there was one book I did, A Noise Downstairs, where they kind of both went with the same cover idea. But they're always a little different.
I haven't seen the UK version this time, but I do like the American cover. It's pretty sharp.
What was the original nugget of information or inspiration, I guess, for this book? And how long did you have that in your pocket, that nugget before the book came to life?
That's a really good question. Because some books I've had that little nugget and they were sort of hanging around for quite a while. I did a book a couple of years ago called Take Your Breath Away. And the opening for that novel, what basically was a woman who would seemingly had been gone for an hour to go to pick up some groceries, and when she pulls back at her address and she looks, and the house is different. It's a different house than when she left, as if the other one had been torn down and a new one had been put on its place. And she gets out of the car and she says, "Where's my house? What happened to my house?" And I love that ending or that opening so much. And then I thought, I have no idea what happened. And and I thought about it for a couple of years. Then I thought, I got to do that one. So I forced myself to sit down one day and I wrote down like 10 possible explanations. And I quickly discarded alien abduction, and then I finally came up with one that I worked. So the opening for or the nugget for Not a Word, that's almost a tough question. I'm trying to think where that came from. I think it really did come from the very opening as I described it, which was this fellow coming back to his parents' house and coming upon this scene, and then by the end of the very first chapter, throwing a twist at the reader that which many reviews have already revealed, but I'm not going to in case someone hasn't read them. And so, but I had that. I think that was the sort of the kernel. And then I started thinking, well, what's the backdrop to the story? And at some point I started thinking about the whole sort of Purdue opioid scandal and pharmaceuticals that were pumping out medications that they knew were incredibly addictive and pursued selling them because the money they were making was just so delightful. And I think I started thinking about how I could merge those two things.
Yeah.
So that's probably, it's funny though, sometimes the original kernel for a book, by the time the book's gone, you've discarded that. You don't even have it anymore, because the book morphs into something else. And I've had that happen, I'm sure, at least once or twice.
One of the villains in this book is Big Pharma. Um, how do you write a big corporation as the villain and still keep the story flowing?
Well, it doesn't matter how big the corporation is, it's still run by people.
Yeah.
And it's people who make the decisions. It's people who are behind those decisions. And so the focus has to be on, I think, on that. The big corporation as an entity in itself isn't all that scary. It's the people who make the policies and will do whatever they have to do to protect themselves. And so I never really thought about the fact that a big corporation thing was going to slow down the story. In fact, I mean, I'm so not business minded. I'm the kind of guy when I have my annual meeting with the financial planner and the accountant, I just like almost instantly kind of glaze over. I have no idea. It's like they could be speaking in sort of Portuguese or anything. And then finally at the end of them, I just kind of said, how much do we have any money? And if they say yes, then I think, okay. And then they said, are there forms that I have to sign? And then they say, yes, I sign the forms, and that's it. So So it's not in me to write a sort of corporate business kind of thriller. It did work for me to sort of imagine the people who were involved in a big company like this and have some fun with that.
I have a twist question, because you did mention there is a big twist very, very soon in the book. In a lot of books that we read, they're like a slow burn and we don't get the twist till the end, and some are placed, how do you pick where you're gonna put the big ones? And then what made you decide to put that one? I mean, it's a gut wrench, and it's like, what? Okay. And right in the beginning.
Well, it's I want readers to be interested, and I have to keep myself interested. And if I'm not interested, then I can't expect anyone picking up the book to be. And so when I'm writing something, I try to think, well, what is there a way that I can end this chapter that is not the way I would normally or a reader might expect it to end? Is there something that I can do at not the end of every chapter, but as many of them as I can to just do some kind of a little twist or something that will make them go, wait a minute, and then keep on reading. I mean, I think part of it is, I'm a kid of TV generation. I was addicted to television through the 60s and 70s, and I had all these favorite shows. And when people will say, well, who inspired you to write? And they want me to say Hemingway or something like that. And or Agatha Christie. And for me, it's television. And so I had all these favorite shows, whether it was Man from Uncle or Mannix or Mission Impossible. And just before commercial breaks, something would happen that was like a bit of a twist or a cliffhanger or a suspenseful moment. And then there'd be this commercial, and you run to the bathroom to get a snack, and then you would come back. And to me, that's what chapter breaks are.
Mhm.
And I'll read other authors who will put a major twist in the dead middle of a chapter, and I'm thinking, don't do that. Like put it at the end of a chapter, because that white space between the end of one chapter and the next one, it's kind of sends a message to a reader, like something big just happened, and take a breath and then keep on going. And so that's kind of my way of thinking. And I like to have, if I can, I like to have a good little surprise or a twist by the end, and a few more minor ones along the way. And I think that even if you can do one in a first chapter, I mean, I think that the biggest threat or competition for people who do what I do is television. It's when Netflix drops, season 4 of The Diplomat on Friday, and you think, I'm going to watch all of these episodes this weekend. And used to be, when you waited a week for a show, people would read a book in the interim. And now we've got 10 chapters of a new great show. The new Reacher is out. And so, we're going to watch all that. So if you're writing a book, you really have to get a reader's attention and grab them, and you have to do it right away. And because if you don't, they're just going to put on some streaming service, and they're going to watch Paradise, or they're going to watch Reacher. And so that's my goal, is to try to write it in such a way that you just, maybe for just a little while, you'll stop watching something, or scrolling your phone forever, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I grew up in the 80s. She's a little bit younger than me, but I grew up in the 80s, and the TV back then it's totally different than it is now. And
Yeah.
even the appetite for, I guess you say, entertainment has changed, where now everything is on demand. And like you said, you get 6, 8, 10 episodes and you're done. Back in the day, we would get Who Shot JR, and then you had to wait 6 months or 4 months until you found out who shot him.
Yeah.
That's what I grew up with. It. And like you say, I do enjoy I read a lot. And the twist, they just keep you going. They just a little bit, one more chapter, and you realize it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And Linwood has got me twisted, and I've got to finish. I can't go to sleep now. I've got to get a cup of coffee and read on, you know.
Well, nothing makes me happier to hear that I've ruined someone's sleep. You know, I mean, my apologies and all, but that's one of the best compliments you can get, I think.
Yeah. Uh, Another one, you know, I love a big thriller slash horror because there's some freaky stuff, you know, goes on in your stuff, especially like within Whistle. You know,
Oh yeah.
that was horror tinged. You know, it was, you know, but one of your big fans and friend, I think, is Stephen King. How does that affect your writing? How much do you bounce stuff off of each other? I mean, you know, he can sneeze, and here's a 1,300 page book. You know, how how
Yes.
how does that friendship work and affect your writing?
Well, it's first of all, I think probably the coolest thing that's happened to me in this profession as a writer is that it's I've gotten to meet some interesting people, and but number one on that spot is Steve, and I found out about God maybe 12, 13 years ago or more that he was reading my books and really liked them, and then he was writing a column for Entertainment Weekly and happened to mention a novel of mine called The Accident, how much he liked it, and so eventually we kind of connected by email, and then he was in coming to an event in Toronto where I live, and I got to meet him for the first time, and I had met him another time when he was in Toronto. But we're sort of have this kind of mutual admiration. I mean, I've always been a huge fan. I mean, I think I was reading him in like the late 70s, early 80s. My introduction was actually the movie Carrie,
Oh,
and then I sought out the novels. And so he's been a big fan and a great supporter. Whistle, which you referenced, was really a departure for me, and I think probably was inspired in some ways by a lot of Steve's novels, because Whistle was more of a horror supernatural book, and that's the only one of those that I've done. I did a sort of tech kind of thriller a few years ago called Look Both Ways, which was more like a Michael Crichton thriller about self-driving cars running amok. Um, but um, but it's fun. I mean, we don't really bounce stuff each other too much, but it's when I have an ARC or an early edition, I'll send it to him. With Whistle, he knew I was doing that book, and I've been talking to him about it. And the very first person who read Whistle before my agent, before my editor, before my wife was Steve. He said, "Yeah, I want to read it." And so, but he didn't want to read it on a screen, so I printed it out and sent it to him. But now it's funny that the thing we're back and forth in emails almost every week, and it's usually, I mean, we're binge watching shows too when we should be reading books. And most recently, we've been back and forth about how we can't stop watching Cape Fear, even though it's the most ludicrously, loosely plotted thing we'd ever seen, and we're just kind of on so many levels we're appalled by it, and yet at the same time we couldn't take our eyes off of it,
it's like a train
and
wreck.
oh, it's just a slow moving train wreck. Like I'll get an email out of nowhere and it'll say, "Are you watching such and such?" Because I think like we were both watching Maximum Pleasure Guaranteed, which we were both liking, and so it's kind of it's a relationship, a friendship that I treasure. It's just very cool to do that. It's very fun of just sitting around and then looking up an email and it's Steve saying, "Are you watching this other thing? Because it makes no sense."
Oh, that well, you kind of mentioned a little bit there. I'm gonna do one more question, Teresa, and then we'll go back to you.
Yep.
Um, Adaptations. How much you've had a few things adapted, right?
Well, not much, but go, yeah, carry on.
How is there anything that you protect on the page because you know what's going to happen when it gets into the hands of screenwriters and producers and that stuff?
No, I don't. And I don't because first of all, getting something made into a TV show or a movie is like winning. It's like winning, having a winning lottery ticket. You can buy them all day and every week, and one of them never paid. None pay off. I mean, I've had two of my books adapted into TV series in France, so I had no involvement with them. Because the first one was The Accident, and it was very faithfully followed the book. And then they did No Time for Goodbye last year, and that was very good. And it looks like there'll be a third one. And I've had a lot of stuff optioned in North America, but very little to show for it. And we did do one. My novel Never Saw It Coming. I wrote an adaptation for that, and it got shot in Canada with Eric Roberts and Emily Hampshire from Schitt's Creek, and I wrote that, and I've been involved in adaptations. I've been involved in adaptations of other my book in writing the adaptations. Like I spent 6 months working on an adaptation of for Trust Your Eyes, which I was doing it for Martin Campbell, the director who did Casino Royale and so forth. But you know what happens is you spend all this time on something, and then finally, whatever interested party is, whether a network or whatever, they finally go, yeah, no, I don't think we'll do it. And and the thing I like about writing novels is when you get a contract to write a book, it comes out,
Mhm.
which is so unlike the business, the movie business. You can have a contract to work on things, and one out of 100, get made. I don't know if it's even that many. So so I've done a lot of adaptation work of my own for screenplays, but I've kind of tired of it. I think that if it would have to be just something amazing that would come along that could persuade me to actually do the adaptation myself. I
Yeah.
have grandkids. I'm busy,
Yeah.
you know.
I have a multiple points of view kind of question. So how do you decide when you're going to tell the story through multiple points of view? And then in this book, did a character kind of show themselves more than what you were expecting when you started as through the writing process?
As far as the second part, I don't think so. I know that, and I remember Elmore Leonard would talk about, how some character kind of takes over, and I hadn't had a case like that too much, at least not in this book. Um, but as far as multiple points of view, it's funny. The first several novels that I wrote, were all first person. And I started to find that limiting because I thought I can only tell you about what the main character knows. So I can't spend any time with the bad guys. I can't spend any time with other characters on their own. And I found that limiting. So then I started to write what I would call first person, third person books, which is like not a word, where I would have a first person chapter, and then he leaves the screen, and then we have a third person chapter. And I thought, first of all, well, you can't do that. That breaks all kinds of rules. And I thought, well, I've seen Harlan Coben do it. I've seen James Lee Burke do it. If they can get away with it, I'm going to do it. And so it jumps back and forth that way. And that allows me to just jump into other characters and get into their lives and find out what they're thinking. And it also means that I can show the reader things that are happening that present a threat to the main character. And this stuff, and that character doesn't. And so you're like, oh no, I'm worried for this guy because these guys are going to do this to him, and he's walking around like everything's just hunky dory. And so I like mixing it up that way too. A book I've just finished writing, I wanted to try to get back to doing almost all first person. And so I do have some uh, additional chapters throughout the book that are italicized from one other person's point of view. But so I just kind of mix it up. But sometimes I need to tell readers more stuff. And the only way I can do that is if I have, a number of different points of view.
Your early career was in newspaper.
Yeah.
How is there anything that you learned from the newspapers that affected your fiction writing?
Yeah, big time. That's a great question. I mean, and not even so much what I write about, but how I work. And first of all, deadlines are sacred. You are never late. You can't be late when you work in a newspaper, and what you're going to be to write is going to be read in less than 24 hours. It's going to be out there. So deadlines mean everything. And I've never delivered a book late. I almost always deliver books early. Not too early because then they're going to look at it anyway. But but deadlines are sacred. And the other thing is don't over romanticize the craft. Writing is a job. Writing is work.
Mhm.
And I just sit down and go to work. And all this stuff about I like to do a big rant all the time about writer's block. I mean, imagine if you were a newspaper columnist or writer. I was a columnist for 14 years, doing 3 columns a week. And imagine if I just called my editor, I called the city editor, and I said, you know, I just wasn't feeling it today. I've got writer's block. I can't do it. And they'd say, well, why don't you get writer's block at another paper? And to me, is there accountant block? Is there teacher's block? Is there sanitation workers block? I mean, it's like we're so delicate and precious that we have a condition to describe not doing our job. And everybody's like, oh, we understand. You're a writer. That's okay. You have writer's block. That's okay. You've got the vapors. You can't do your thing. And I just think, give me a break. It's a job. And so I don't romanticize it. It's work. It happens to be kind of work that I love to do. It's great. And we all have days where we can't do our job. Like we're sick. We got a family member who's got a problem. You got mom's in the hospital. Like any number of things can happen that impact our work and make it hard to do. But I don't think there's anything special about it. You're a writer.
Yeah.
Like you just have to get down. I mean, you just have to do the work.
Yeah. What is your process? Your day, do you have a goal daily or do you a goal per week? How long do you give yourself to finish a book too?
So when I and I have an idea, I'll probably spend a week or more just kind of making notes about, well, it could be this, it could be that. And I want to know the big picture. I want to know kind of who the main players are. I want to know who's done what. I would like to know the ending, and I know my starting point. I have no idea what's in what I call the big mushy middle. I don't know what that is, but I don't see the opportunities that exist there until I get going. But I know where I want to end up. It's kind of like you get in a car in New York and you drive into LA, you know where you're going, but you have a lot of ways to get there.
Yeah.
And so once I've been sort of making notes for about a week, I think I'm tired of doing this. Let's just write the opener. And I'll start writing the first chapter. And my goal for me is to try to get 1,500 to 2,000 words done a day. And if I can do that, that's 8 to 10,000 words a week. And in 2.5 to 3 months, I should have a first draft. And then I'll leave it for a week and then or more, and then I'll go back and I'll go through it again and fix some things I think worked. And a lot of times too, I find when I go back into it again, that's when I sharpen up the details and I put in a little more color and so forth. I mean, my other analogy is that I like to have a plan. I know there's this whole thing about plotters versus pantsers. If you plot the whole thing out, it goes by the seat of your pants. And I'm kind of in the middle of that. I wouldn't build a house without blueprints and a solid foundation. But I don't need to know the color of the drapes. I don't have to pick what the appliances will be. I can figure that out later, but I just need to know the structure. Is it 2-story? Is it 3-story? How big is it? And if I know that, I can start going in, and then when I go in again, do a second draft, I can think, okay, now I'm going to paint this wall green, and I can do this stuff, and I know how I can improve it.
You mentioned that you had like one book was a little Michael Crichton inspired or a
Yeah.
little Stephen King inspired. So all these things. Is there anything that you have done or okay, so you have the multiple POVs, you have the first person with the inserts. Have you ever intentionally challenged yourself in the writing process? Like, I'm going to
Oh
try
yeah.
this. Let's see.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think, well, first of all, I think Whistle was challenging myself to see if I could do a horror novel. And Look Both Ways was that way. And I think that for me the challenge often really is you want to give readers what they would expect to get from a Linwood Barclay novel without giving them the same Linwood Barclay novel. How can I give you what you expect to get from me, but make it just different enough that you don't read it and say, oh, well, he did this before. And so I think that is always the challenge with every book is what can I do that hasn't been done? I was having a chat with my literary agent, and she was saying, "What if you did such and such?" That could, and I said, "That was my novel, Fear the Worst. I've done that." So, or Never Look Away. I've done that book. And so when you've done 25 or 26, you think the challenge is, how can I do something that's different enough, but not so different that you'll go, oh, well, I don't like this one. So I think that's probably it. And I think probably that the greatest influence on me ever goes way back to in my teens when I became absolutely obsessed with the Lou Archer novels by Ross MacDonald and read all of them, devoured them, wrote a thesis in university that was largely about them, to the point that I wrote to the author and had a long correspondence with him. When I was 21, I had dinner one night with Ross MacDonald, and because he was in Canada, and any other kid in Canada would be like, I want to spend an evening with Wayne Gretzky. Well, I don't care anything about that. But I got to spend an evening with Ross MacDonald, and we had a long correspondence. I mean, and I think that his novels, which were so much about family dysfunction and buried secrets and so forth, probably have had a greater influence on me than any other writer.
Is there a genre that you would like to try? Stephen wrote a couple of kids books. Is there anything you'd like to stick your toe in eventually?
Well, I did write two thrillers for children. They were called, what were they called? They were called Chase and Escape. I would have done more, but they didn't sell enough that I thought it was worth my time to do them. I've done humor books. I've written two books of political satire, making fun of some Canadian politicians, and I've done the horror novel. And I don't see any others. So I don't think I have a romance novel, and maybe that's for sure. Nothing against them. I enjoy sci-fi, but I've never wanted to write it.
Yeah.
I think you stick with what you think you're probably best at,
Yeah.
and that's Not a Word is that kind of a book.
Yeah. Where on the social media and interwebs can our listeners and viewers find you? What handles do you use?
Well, I'm on X under just Linwood Barclay. I tried Blue Sky and what's the other one?
Threads.
Threads. I just wasn't getting any kind of traction on that one, on those. So I'm still on X. I'm on Facebook. I can never figure out Instagram, but I'm on there and my publishers will put stuff up on Instagram. Am I the only one who's just too stupid to figure out Instagram? Every time my wife follows Instagram because our kids are on it. My son's an artist. He's on your phone. It's gone. Where does it go? I don't know. But you could, and you can also find the information like following where I'm going to be on for appearances at linwoodbarclay.com. So between Facebook and X and linwoodbarclay.com, I'm out there.
Okay. With you being in Canada, is there any bookstores in the United States that carry signed copies of your books that can be shipped to your fans?
Not at the moment. I think the only way we would do that would be as if I did what they like book plates and signed them and sent. But at the moment, no. I don't think there's nowhere they would at the current time that they could get those. Okay. People can order from Canada. I'm about starting next week. We'll be hitting a whole slew of stores doing signings in the Greater Toronto area. And so I'm going to post about where those are. And so people would be able to get those copies from them.
All right. I can get a list too from Chris at the Morrow Group. He'll have that. Is there anything that we didn't ask that you want to talk about?
No geography questions. No, you were great. No math questions. It was terrific.
What is X plus Y and Z? Yeah.
I can't tell you. I'm sorry. We're out of time.
Thank you to Linwood Barclay, whose newest book, Not a Word, will be available August the 25th from William Morrow, wherever you get your books. Thank you to Chris at the Morrow Group for arranging all of this. Good luck, and we hope to see your name on a few of those bestseller lists here pretty soon.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you.